Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are strapping into the time machine, setting the coordinates for 16th century Antwerp. Now this place wasn't just the heart of European trade. It was buzzing, really the nexus of a visual revolution. And right at the center, a publisher named Hieronymus Cock.
Yeah, Hieronymus Cock. It's key to remember he wasn't, a painter himself or even primarily an engraver, but he was this incredible catalyst. He took the emerging artistic identity of the Northern Netherlands, their sort of national style,
Right.
and just pushed it onto the global stage using printmaking. He basically figured out how to monetize what it meant to be Dutch in visual terms.
That's fascinating. And the timing was critical too, wasn't it?
Absolutely crucial. You have to understand the context. Cock's huge commercial success happened right when this national consciousness was surging. The Netherlands was really starting to define itself against Spain, its political overlords, and they were consciously rejecting that constant cultural looking towards Italy. They wanted their own sources, their own traditions.
That sounds like a powerful mandate for someone like Cock, an entrepreneur. So how does a publisher, someone focused on distribution, end up shaping a national identity?
Well, it's that perfect balance of commerce and culture. He understood that mass production print was the most efficient way to spread a visual message.
Okay, so our mission today is to really unpack Cock's strategy, how he went from copying Roman trends to inventing new genres, and that massive collaboration with Pieter Bruegel the Elder. That seems key.
Oh, it's central. Absolutely.
And then tracing how these prints ended up influencing everything from high art to, furniture design, all across the globe.
Exactly. It's quite a story.
All right, let's jump into the printing press then.
Let's do it.
So, when Cock first started out, his strategy was, pretty safe, right? Understandably so.
Very safe. He was essentially mirroring the big publishing houses down in Rome, issuing prints based on Italian masters, Raphael, that sort of thing, plus views of antique sculptures, ruins, the standard fare.
Following the dominant tastes, basically, what everyone else expected.
Right. It was a smart way to enter the market, get established. But as soon as he had some success, things changed dramatically.
He had the capital to experiment.
Exactly. He could take risks. And there were a couple of forces pushing him. Commercially, yeah, exploring themes that weren't already saturated. But also, artistically and politically, the timing was just perfect to focus on genres that felt distinctly Netherlandish.
And if you think Netherlandish art strengths, landscape has got to be number one around.
Precisely. They already had this incredibly strong tradition. It goes way back to the early 15th century. Artists like Joachim Patinier.
Ah, the cosmic landscape guy.
That's the one. These weren't just, pretty local views. They were vast panoramic visions meant to be like a model of the entire universe, the world.
So Vasari was there. Netherlandish painters were seen as kind of the best at landscape. But you're saying pure landscape hadn't really taken off as a print genre yet.
And that's the paradox, isn't it? It's fascinating. The painters were masters, no doubt. But it really took an entrepreneurial publisher like Cock to successfully launch pure landscape as a print genre.
Wow.
And once I did, boom, it became one of the absolute dominant categories in Dutch and Flemish publishing from then on.
So a commercial move really solidified an artistic tradition in a new medium.
You got it. A commercial decision with massive artistic consequences.
And Cock had a personal stake in this too, didn't he? Through his family.
That's right. His brother, Pieter Cock, Hieronymus paid homage to him after he died. Pieter was this really interesting transitional figure, sort of between that earlier Patinier cosmic style and what Bruegel would later do.
Okay.
And even though Hieronymus Cock mostly stopped engraving himself quite early on, he actually made a rare exception for Pieter. He personally engraved a series of his brother's quite poetic landscape fantasies, made sure that part of the family tradition was printed and preserved.
That's quite something, a real nod to his roots. And it sets the stage perfectly for, probably the biggest partnership in 16th century printmaking.
Bruegel.
Pieter Bruegel the Elder.
Yeah,
the timing here was just impeccable. Bruegel gets back from Italy around 1554. He wasn't famous yet, not really. But he came back with this huge collection of landscape drawings, sketches, impressions, his whole travel portfolio, basically.
And Cock saw potential immediately.
Instantly. Cock snapped him up, and their collaboration, their friendship really lasted right until Cock's death. Bruegel basically only drew for Cock's prints.
Exclusively. Wow. And they kicked things off with the series of big landscapes, right? back to that cosmic idea.
They did. Bruegel fully embraced Patinier's concept, the huge, world-encompassing view, reflecting on life, often with symbolic stuff like the journey of life woven in.
But he wasn't just repeating Patinier. He brought something new. Oh, completely new. He brought this incredible sense of conviction, this captivating authenticity. It was unprecedented. Even though these were compositions made in the studio, he'd blend bits from the Alps, scenes from Italy, local Brabant landscapes that just felt so real.
How did he achieve that feeling?
Masterful organization, often using multiple vanishing points, ways to draw the viewer right into this vast space without it feeling forced or artificial.
That realism is amazing, especially since they weren't painted on the spot. That story about 20th century researchers trying to find the exact locations.
Right. It just shows his power of observation and how brilliantly he could synthesize it all.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more.
Yeah.
Because out of those 12 sheets in the series, there's this question about authorship for a couple of them.
Ah, yes. That's a fascinating detail that really highlights Cock's role as the publisher.
Oh, so?
Well, researchers have suspected for a long time that 2 sheets might not actually be by Bruegel. One in particular, a rural scene, it just looks stylistically a bit off. The panoramic background feels almost tacked onto the village in the foreground. Recent work points towards maybe Jacob Grimm, an early Flemish landscape guy.
So Cock might have substituted work by a lesser-known artist, Grimmer perhaps, and just put Bruegel's name on it, because Bruegel was becoming the bigger name.
It seems very likely. Remember, Cock owned the copper plate. He controlled the attribution. It was his investment.
So the artist's name was kind of like a brand.
Pretty much. And we know he did it before. Famously, he signed one of Bruegel's early works with Hieronymus Bosch's name because Bosch was still the huge name in that style.
Pure 16th century brand management. Incredible. Okay, so the big landscapes show Bruegel mastering the existing tradition, but then came the real game changer.
Exactly. The next series, The Small Landscapes. This was the true revolution.
Small, unassuming prints. Rural motifs. Houses, trees, villages.
Just simple things. A house, a few trees, the edge of a village. Absolutely unusual for the grand European tradition at the time. Totally different scale and focus.
They sound almost boring compared to the cosmic views. What was Cock thinking? What was the plan?
Well, the initial plan was quite specific. Cock actually marketed this series directly to other artists.
As a tool.
Yes, like a source book. The idea was, painters could use these incredibly well-observed naturalistic details, a perfectly drawn tree here, a realistic cottage there, as building blocks for composing their own big landscapes.
Ah, like stock images for painters.
Kind of, but then something totally unexpected happened.
They took off with the public.
Massively popular, especially with the rising middle class, the burghers in Antwerp and other cities. This was right when people were starting to, take summer holidays, rent houses in the country.
An escape from the city.
Exactly. And these prints offered this perfect idealized vision, a sort of Dutch bucolic. Very clean, very peaceful, none of the actual mud and hard labor of real country life.
So it's like the 16th century version of cottagecore that idealized rural simplicity.
That's a perfect analogy. Yes, it was a national idol packaged for the urban elite.
And this source book accidentally becomes this powerful symbol of national identity for this new class.
Precisely. And the legacy was huge. It really influenced 17th century Dutch painting, all those simple scenes of houses, canals, fishing villages, even when later copies got misattributed back to Bruegel himself.
Amazing how something intended as a technical aid becomes so culturally significant. Okay, so Bruegel tackles landscape, revolutionizes it, then he shifts gears completely.
Yeah.
Into the grotesque.
Correct. After the landscape series, his focus for Cock's prints pivots entirely. He dives deep into the Boschesque tradition.
Moralizing, hellish, fantastical scenes.
Yeah.
Like Hieronymus Bosch.
Exactly like Bosch, or rather inspired by him. And this work for Cock really becomes Bruegel's creative laboratory. He used drawing for print to experiment with really bold ideas, new ways of composing, new styles, before maybe trying them out in his paintings later.
And in doing this, he deliberately turned his back on what was considered high art at the time, that classical Italian influence style.
He did. He pretty much ignored the Romanist style that was fashionable, especially in religious art, even some religious art that Cock himself was publishing.
What defined that Romanist style he was rejecting? What did it look like?
Think classical idealism, perfect anatomy based on Greek and Roman sculpture like Raphael or Michelangelo, grand themes, often mythological or religious, treated with a kind of noble seriousness.
Okay.
Bruegel instead just leaned right into his native Netherlandish roots. Late Gothic styles, you could say. You see it really clearly in figures like Christ and his descent into limbo. Anatomically, by classical standards, they're maybe incorrect, but they have this incredible spiritual power, this expressiveness. He chose national roots over international fashion.
And visually, for someone listening who isn't familiar with Bosch, what does that Bosch-esque tradition actually look like? What would they see in these prints?
Okay, think medieval anxieties made visible. Grotesque hybrid creatures, half man, half beast, or part animal, part object. Devils everywhere. Scenes of hell, temptation, punishment. A very northern Gothic imagination.
Sounds intense.
It is. But Bruegel used this vocabulary in a way that was suggestively accessible. He often visualized popular proverbs or common sayings.
Ah, right, like the Seven Deadly Sins series. You mentioned idleness is the devil's cushion.
Mhm.
He literally draws that.
He literally draws it. A figure lounging on a cushion that is a devil, it makes the abstract concept instantly viscerally visual. Now, lots of the details in his prints are still puzzling, even for scholars. He probably used local jokes or puns we just don't get anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the main moral point was always crystal clear. Sin leads to ugliness, to monstrosity. The first thing any viewer would think was, this is like Bosch's hell.
And he used this direct visual language for social commentary, too, relevant to Antwerp's focus on money and trade, like the Battle of the Strong Boxes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a brilliant one. Just imagine seeing that print in super wealthy Antwerp. Money chests, coin purses, and barrels literally fighting each other.
The message is pretty blunt.
Instantly understood. It visualizes that common idea about the cycle of human affairs. Wealth breeds pride, pride leads to conflict, conflict leads to poverty. Boom, boom, boom. The fighting strongbox is spilling coins, it's immediate. No need to decode complex symbols.
Even his satires seem to have layers. The extraction of the Stone of Madness with those grotesque figures. It wasn't just making fun of fools.
No, much deeper than that. It ties right into northern humanism, like Erasmus's praise of folly. In that worldview, foolishness wasn't just silliness, it was a serious spiritual vice. A kind of blindness that makes people choose earthly nonsense over eternal salvation.
So the exaggerated ugliness in the print is meant to show how spiritually repulsive that kind of foolishness is.
Exactly. Bruegel's using the grotesque to make a serious moral point, rooted in his own cultural context.
Yeah.
So Bruegel's genius gives new life to landscape and the grotesque, and Hieronymus Cock's publishing house sends it all out into the world.
That's the power of print in the 16th century. It was the internet of its day, really, and Antwerp as this massive trade hub.
The connections were global.
Absolutely. These prints, religious scenes, genre, landscapes, they spread incredibly fast. France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany, and even further.
And you said the easiest place to actually track this influence is in the patterns, the ornamental and architectural prints.
Exactly, because those were designed to be copied. They were literally blueprints for craftsmen, cabinet makers, jewelers, stonemasons. They all used them. And Cock published the absolute giants in this field, the key graphic designers of the era.
Like Cornelis Florus, you mentioned the Florus style.
Yes, Florus basically took the Italian grotesque, those fanciful decorations based on ancient Roman designs, and reworked it into something distinctly Northern European. Strapwork, masks, fruit swags. It became this hugely popular decorative language, especially across the Baltic, Germany, Scandinavia. It basically defined Flemish ornamentation for a generation.
So Cock's publishing house is essentially exporting the how-to guide for building and decorating in the northern style.
Pretty much. And then you have Hans Vredeman de Vries, an absolute master of architectural graphics and perspective. He championed the classical orders Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, based on Vitruvius, but, and this is key, he insisted they had to be adapted.
Adapted how?
Adapted to local conditions, local climate, local building types. He showed how to modify the decoration, the elements. He basically gave permission to make classicism local, practical.
A flexible, pragmatic classicism.
You could say that. And the specific decorative bits Vredeman de Vries developed for this adapted style, they were immensely popular. We find traces of his designs spread through Cock's prints as far away as Peru by the late 16th century. Local builders just picked them up.
Peru.
And his influence was massive in Eastern Europe, too. Designs derived from his prints heavily shaped what called Riga Baroque architecture. You see it in places like Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod.
That is an absolutely incredible reach. South America, Eastern Europe,
Mm.
all stemming from this one print shop in Antwerp. It really hammers home that Cock was maybe the single most important distributor of the Northern Renaissance visual language.
I think that's fair to say. Cox's publishing house at the Sign of the Four Winds wasn't just selling pictures. It established Antwerp as the main hub, the primary distributor for this new northern visual language. And it shaped everything from high art composition down to, yeah, the look of furniture and buildings across continents.
So, wrapping this up, what does it all mean for us? Hieronymus Cock takes these national strengths, the landscape tradition from Patinier, the moralizing Bosch-esque tradition,
Mm-hmm.
and using the sort of industrial engine of Antwerp publishing, he turns them into these sharp, visually powerful, commercially successful prints that go on to define a European, even global style.
Yeah, the whole period, his whole enterprise is built on that tension, isn't it? Looking back, digging into those national traditions for authentic inspiration, but also looking forward, creating entirely new commercial forms,
Mm.
new markets, new ways of seeing. Koch really understood the modern economy of visual culture long before anyone else.
Which leads to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe take away. Think about the power dynamics in that story, those small landscapes. Remember, it started as just a technical source book, a collection of useful bits and pieces for artists making those grand, world-spanning cosmic views.
Just raw material.
Yet it accidentally becomes this incredibly popular, beloved symbol of national identity for the growing middle class. And that simple, unassuming little scene in the house, the trees, it arguably ends up influencing more artists and defining more of 17th century Dutch painting than the magnificent cosmic landscapes it was originally meant to serve. Form following function in a way nobody expected.